We were having these minutes just to welcome everybody. There are so many people connected today. This is really exciting. In order to learn about this issue, this topic, I'm going to speak a little bit about why we are doing this seminar, this webinar. AWID is an association that supports feminist movements globally, and we are today holding this webinar about care work. Care work is work. This is the title. It's about care workers organizing beyond borders. When we talk about work, many times we leave aside care work, and this is where we see one of the problems between capitalism and patriarchy, because our system depends on this care work, which has been overloaded on women, and this work, this care work, many times is not recognized and rewarded accordingly, and many labor movements are focused on formal ways of work, which have guarantees, which have the proper payment, and many times movements try to guarantee that these labor conditions are complied with, and care work has not enough visibility, is not recognized as a work, and we cannot live without it. We cannot have a world without care. So many times, the activities of taking care of little children, of elderly, or people with disability is very, very important and is not properly recognized. So today, our panel is going to share with us some elements from their associations, for example, from Kerala, from ASHA, who are holding a strike for many days. Then we have from the east of Africa, an association working with HIV people. So we're going to speak a little bit with some organizations who are going to share their experiences, their challenges, and we are going to have at the end of the session a Q&A space. So remember, you have a button there, a little box, so you can send your questions there. I'm going to switch to English now, to Spanish.
So I want to go first to Anita Kumari. Anita is from the Kerala ASHA Health Workers Association, and we would love to hear from you on the demands and issues facing the ASHA workers in Kerala, because many people around the world may not know at this point. Please let us know, how many days have you guys been on strike? And please introduce yourself. Welcome, Anita.
Madam, ഞങ്ങള് 87-ാം ദിവസമാണ് സമരം തുടങ്ങിയിട്ട് ഇന്നത്തെ ദിവസം.
We striked for 87 days.
നമ്മള് 43 ദിവസം റിലേ നിരാഹാര സമരം അനുഷ്ഠിച്ചു. ഇപ്പോഴും നിരാഹാര സമരം നിർത്തിവെച്ചു. ഞങ്ങള് ജില്ല തോറും ഇപ്പോൾ 1-ാം തീയതി മുതൽ സമരപരിപാടികളുമായിട്ട് ഓരോ ജില്ല തോറും പോകുന്നതാണ്.
Every district we have been working, every district we have been going towards each and every district within Kerala.
17-ാം തീയതി വരെ സമരപരിപാടികളായിട്ട് മുൻപോട്ട് പോവുകയാണ്.
Till 17th we are going to continue the strike.
Anita, please let us know a little bit more about yourself.
ഞങ്ങളുടെ ഈ ദൗത്യം ഏറ്റെടുത്തിട്ട് 2008 ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇങ്ങനെ
We started this work in 2008.
പ്രോജക്റ്റ് എന്ന രീതിയിൽ
We started this work as a part of central government,
ഈ ഫീൽഡിൽ വന്നിട്ട് മേഡം
ASHA Workers
ആദ്യം
Association.
വരുമാനത്തിലായിരുന്നു
We had very less income when we started this work.
ഭാരിച്ച വർക്കുകളൊന്നും ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല.
At that time, we did not have such heavy work. We had to only look after women's work and pregnant women's work.
കേരളത്തിലെ എല്ലാ ആരോഗ്യ മേഖലയും ഇത്രത്തോളം ഉയരത്തിലെത്തുന്നത്
But now every health-related work have been handled by us, and they have been getting very good support because of our work. Any be it the care for kids, palliative care, pregnant women, or women's care. It is only females who have been working for ASHA workers. We have been getting very less income. We have been receiving an honorarium award of 7,000. And Kerala government increased 1,000 rupees recently. We have been getting it as a way of honorarium or incentive money only. We started the strike only because our funds have been stopped since last 4 or 5 months. The people who work along with us are the people who are backward with respect to income. Daily we were receiving only 32 rupees. Since we went on a strike for last 2 months, we have not received any funds. This is the way we have been receiving our income. We have been working for continuous 10 hours. We finish our work by 6 p.m. and post this we have to go home and work for our family. We have to take care of all our reports. The video is stuck. I'm not able to hear Anita. The video is stuck. I'm not able to hear Anita.
കിട്ടിക്കൊണ്ടിരുന്നത് തന്നെ ഞങ്ങൾ ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു മീറ്റിംഗിന് പോയില്ലെങ്കിൽ 700 രൂപ കട്ടാക്കുമായിരുന്നു. ഇങ്ങനെ കട്ട് ചെയ്ത്
the funds used to be reduced by 700 rupees in case we did not attend even one of the meetings that is being conducted.
ഇപ്പോൾ സമരം ചെയ്തതിന്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ട് അങ്ങനെ ഒരു
now since we had gone for strike,
ഞങ്ങളെ ഒരുപാട് കഷ്ടപ്പെടുത്തി,
they have tortured us a lot.
സംസ്ഥാനങ്ങളിലും ആശാ വർക്കേഴ്സ് ഇത്രയും വർക്ക് ചെയ്യുന്നില്ല, പക്ഷെ കേരളത്തിൽ അധിക ജോലിഭാരമാണ്.
In most of the states, the ASHA workers have not been working this relentlessly, but in Kerala, we have been working relentlessly to work and take care of the people who have health issues.
ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ ഞങ്ങളാണ്. കുട്ടികളുടെ മരണനിരക്കിൽ നമുക്ക് കേരളത്തിലെ 1ാം സ്ഥാനമാണ്. അത് ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ കുറയ്ക്കാൻ നമുക്ക് കഴിഞ്ഞു.
We could reduce
ഒരുപാട് കേരളത്തിൽ നമുക്ക് അത് കുറയ്ക്കാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. നമ്മുടെ മറ്റുള്ള ജനവിഭാഗങ്ങളുടെ ആയുസ്
കൂടുതലാണ്. The death of kids because of the care we have been giving, and we have been caring for the pregnant women and all the elders.
അതെല്ലാം നമ്മളാണ് മാഡം ഇത്രയും കറക്റ്റ് ചെയ്ത് കാര്യങ്ങൾ കൊണ്ടുപോയിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. പക്ഷെ നമ്മൾ ഇത്ര ഒരു തുച്ഛമായ വേതനം, അതായത് ദിവസം ഇപ്പോൾ ഞങ്ങൾ ചോദിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്
daily we have asked for 21,000 rupees. We have only asked for an increase of 100 rupees per day. That is why we have been on strike since 87 days in Kerala. As you know, ma'am, all of us are economically backward people. In Trivandrum itself, we have been continuing the strike. From the moment a lady is pregnant until she delivers the baby, and taking care of the baby has all been done very well by ASHA workers. Until the kids take the BPT booster injection, we support them, we take care of them, and we take complete responsibility of the mother and the kid. At the same time, we have been taking good care of pregnant women and the elderly people who have been left alone. We go to their homes and take care of them. I've been working in the fisheries section. All the work that they require, we have been helping them with it. The only demand that we have is daily we receive 700 rupees. When the Kerala government had the election, we requested them, and they had also promised to give the required fund. Just to fulfill those requests, we started the strike. We are only getting the funds within 10,000 rupees, which is really less to distribute among all the workers. The central government has also said that they would increase our incentives in the parliament, but we have not received any news around the increment of this incentive.
Thank you so much, Anita. And I also want to highlight this other aspect you were pointing out, which is not only are you not being paid what you had already agreed, that would be an increment, but you're also having what happens to many of the people, of the women who are care workers, which is you have this double labor of caring for others during the day with the work you do, but then also having to come home to assume labor. So you have this double shift or triple shift where you have to assume a lot more work. And to speak a little bit about that, I want to go with Kate Lappin. Am I pronouncing your name right?
We have been doing everything. We have to take care of our household. Our own parents are not keeping well. Our husbands, we have to take care of our husbands and everything that is needed in our house. Most of our parents are very old. I came into this field when I was in my 30s, and now most of us are in 40s.
Yes, there's also the impact in your own families, in yourselves, and also in your families. I want to go now with Kate from Public Services International. Kate is the Asia Pacific Regional Secretary for Public Services International. It's a global union of federation that represents 30 million workers and their unions and who deliver public services in over 150 workers. Kate, I wanted to ask you a bit on your work on the social reorganization of care and the implications of this work for community health workers. If you can talk a little bit about some of the learnings on how other community health workers have been organizing in the region and beyond. Welcome, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you so much to AWID for inviting PSI to this workshop. It's wonderful to see so many sisters here with us today and expressing their solidarity with the care workforce around the world, and particularly the care workforce that is completely disregarded and has very little global attention, which is the community health workers. Just like Anita, there's actually millions of women who are doing fundamental work of public health without the right to even be recognised as a worker, and without the right to a minimum wage, not even to minimum wage. And that has many implications, but of course it all stems from a common problem, which is the absolute disregard for care work and for women's work, and the gendered nature of the way in which wages and employment has been set. As you said earlier, the way in which capitalism has been tied up with the exploitation of women's paid and unpaid labour. So it's really a pleasure to be able to talk about what we're doing in the region, in the Asia Pacific region, but also globally, to both organise, and that's always the answer to any fundamental problem, is to get organised and to grow our power, but also what we're trying to do to address the issue globally in international institutions and also building alliances. And for that reason, it's so wonderful to be aligning with AWID. I'm going to share my screen just to be able to share a few images that I've prepared that might give you a little bit of a sense of what we've been doing. But Anita has really covered some of the struggles of the day-to-day work of what we call community health workers. But as you heard from Anita, they could be called ASHAs, or in India, they could be called lady health workers in Pakistan, or community health volunteers, which is, not what they should be called, but that's what they're called in Nepal, or barangay health workers in the Philippines, for example. So we have a lot of different terms, but the campaign that we have is really recognising community health work as work. As you mentioned, Maggie, we are also trying to campaign globally for the whole idea that care actually we need to recognise care as a public good. And the social reorganisation of care campaign that PSI, AWID, other groups have all endorsed is targeting that notion. We should all value care as a public good and a human right, both the right to receive care and to give care and have that care valued, and to see that as a public service, and that care should not be commercialised. It should be at the centre of social organisation, and therefore it's a state responsibility to make sure that we all receive care when we need it, and value the care workers that deliver that care, whether they be currently paid or unpaid. So it's a broader campaign that we invite the feminist movement and the labour movement to align on. And we can come back if people would like to know more about that. But I just wanted to also mention a bit more about the community health workers. As you've heard from Anita, these are women workers who fundamentally changed the nature of the health system. And a lot of this work was actually promoted as a response to the Millennium Development Goals to meet targets on reducing maternal and child mortality, for example. They've done an excellent job in terms of bringing down those risks, and have, during COVID, kept a lot of the society safe, but it's come at the cost of their own lives, their own capacity even to have a dignified life. We've seen some of these women workers, when they stop working, turning to begging even because they don't have a pension and their own health is not valued. They don't have often they don't have health insurance. Yet you can see some of the circumstances that they're actually working in, especially during the increasing number of disasters, climate crisis, and so forth. So what we've done is launch a campaign to recognise community health workers' work, and we've brought unions of health workers, of community health workers, together, and we've supported the growth of new unions of community health workers, and they have put together these common set of demands, and they have developed their own charter, and you'll see that they are grouped in different categories here: the demand for a union and the right to have a union, a collective voice, the demand to be recognised as a worker, not as a volunteer, demand to be respected, and for them to actually receive their own care. They should be cared for, to have occupational health and safety, and for a public health system that's based on the need for care and health and not on profits. So that's the fundamental demands, and you could read more about that in the demands that they've put together. And it's working. I just really want to emphasize that organising has worked. It's the struggle. And as you heard from Anita, sometimes that struggle is endless. But for example, in Pakistan, women really risked their lives and some gave up their lives in this struggle. And they have been recognised as public health workers entitled to a wage. We've had recently, just in December, we've been able to launch a national community health workers union in Pakistan, which brought together workers in every single province. And we have other examples of wins. It is we don't have the recognition in India, in Nepal or Philippines, but they have won different increments. So you can see in Nepal that the Kathmandu local government is recognising the community health workers. We've even had the Prime Minister in his first week accept the set of demands, you'll see. And in other parts of India, women won, for example, the right to maternity leave. So there are wins once these workers are unionised and really are able to show their strength, and they're very determined to show that strength, as you heard from Anita. We've also had recognition in the International Labour Organization, and this was a really important win to have parts of the International Labour Organization say that these workers are undoubtedly covered by the fundamental rights and principles at work. And you can see a group of those community health workers from Nepal travelling to Geneva to make these demands. So there is progress, and I really welcome all of the participants here today in joining this campaign. This picture here is linking to other women workers in the health system, so nurses or urban health workers, because we believe that together the solidarity that we can bring through the union movement and feminist movement will be what's required to actually shift this, just like we did with the domestic workers. It took both the labour movement and the feminist movement to have domestic work recognised as work. And this is where we really want to go with this community health worker campaign. So we've launched a petition, and perhaps we can come back to that, for the community health workers, the ASHA workers in Kerala. And perhaps we can flag that work. There's so many participants here that we could really elevate that petition if everybody was committed to signing, but also sharing with their movement. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you so much, Kate, for sharing this regional perspective. And yes, we will come back to calls for action at the end of this webinar. So please don't leave before we wrap that up. If you are just joining us, we have heard from the Kerala ASHA Health Workers Association and their brave 87-day strike. We've also heard from Public Services International around the regional perspective and what we have been talking as care workers work. And we've also been speaking about the consequence for care workers' lives of these work that they do, which is underpaid, if paid at all, unrecognized, and in conditions that are not necessarily dignified. I want to take us now to the reality of migrant domestic workers in Lebanon with Francisca Ankrah and how they are affected by the war. So Francisca, could you please introduce yourself? Thank you so much for being here, and would love to hear a bit about Egna Legna's reflections and how the organized response to this humanitarian crisis and the effects that it's had on your labor and community organizing efforts.
Of course. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. A happy belated International Workers' Day to you all, and thank you for being here today. So my name is Francisca. I work at Legna Besidet, which is a migrant domestic worker, women-led feminist collective in Lebanon and Ethiopia. And as Maggie mentioned, I want to share some important updates from our team in Lebanon. Many are starting to treat Israeli attacks in Lebanon like COVID, as if it's over and it's behind us. But to be clear, even with the ceasefire in place, Israel is still bombing Lebanon and terrorizing the population. So our movement has been stuck in crisis for a while. Migrant workers, especially those from Africa and South Asia, Southeast Asia, are still facing huge challenges. Many who managed to escape dangerous areas are still trying to find jobs and relief in safer places, but it's tough. Many are now undocumented or have been undocumented for a long time, and work is still hard to come by, and the need for emergency relief is still very, very real. But to understand the challenges now, we need to look at the systemic failures during the peak of the crisis, when Israeli bombings ramped up in September. Everyone was trying to get to safety, but while Lebanese folks were getting evacuation orders and alerts, many migrants were left out of the loop. A lot of them don't have smartphones or access to the internet, and many don't speak Arabic or English well enough to catch the news. And this creates a really dangerous situation. People weren't sure where to leave or where to go. Even when they do get some information, they still have to deal with another problem, which is transportation. Public transport isn't super available, and it can cost a lot during crises. Private taxis often charge crazy high prices, especially during crises. And remember, many employers withhold wages and do not pay a fair wage. So with not much time to evacuate and sometimes with not much money either. And also on top of that, Lebanon went through an economic crisis. So a lot of migrants just couldn't get out before the bombing started. We've actually documented cases of migrants walking for hours, sometimes with their young children, desperately trying to reach safer areas. But what happens when they finally get away from these dangerous places, that's when the systemic exclusion really becomes obvious. A lot of migrants and refugees also got kicked out of shelters. There were plenty of reports of displaced migrants who were being turned away, with government officials saying that the shelters were for Lebanese only. In one case, there was a group of 70 migrants that was kicked out of a school that was turned into a shelter, with state officials even threatening them with arrest just for being foreign. And a lot of migrants were sleeping on the streets, which was a harsh reminder of the 2019 crisis during the economic collapse. Some found shelter in some unsafe construction sites after being turned away from shelters. Even emergency relief services, evacuations, medical help were pretty much non-existent for migrants. Even embassies, which should be helping their own citizens, weren't doing a great job. There were only a few countries like the Philippines, Sri Lanka, Ethiopia, for example, that set up shelters, but their capacity and resources were really limited, and access to basic necessities like food and water, it was very minimal. So it was mostly community groups and organizations like us, like Legna, that stepped up to tackle the humanitarian crisis. And we're doing what we can, but honestly, the level of need is just huge. And this brings me to one of the most frustrating aspects of this crisis, which is the complete neglect by governments, both Lebanese and migrants' home countries, and also international organizations that are mandated to provide this kind of assistance. So even though migrant domestic worker organizers were raising alarms since October 2023 about the situation worsening, there was hardly any preparation in place. The Lebanese government made it clear that if there was an escalation, they would they would only help Lebanese citizens. And even UN agencies like the IOM, which is supposed to help migrants in crisis, the organization with all the resources, with all the know-how, did not set up shelters for migrant communities in Lebanon. So we've seen migrants injured in bombings, getting turned away from hospitals because they couldn't cover the high cost of privatized healthcare. So they wasted a lot of precious time being transported to public hospitals. We also came across cases of migrant women going into labor during displacement without proper medical care. And then there's the employers. We noticed some Lebanese employers escaping to Africa to avoid the bombings, leaving their African workers stranded, sometimes after having confiscated their passports, which is unfortunately a normalized practice under the kafala system. The irony there is just tragic. So the issues go beyond just leaving people behind also. We've also seen people who presented themselves as allies or supporters, taking advantage of the tough situation of migrants, sharing their heartbreaking stories and also some degrading images without actually asking for permission, just to raise money. It was completely dehumanizing. So let's not forget, this is Lebanon we're talking about, where the kafala system keeps migrants and refugees from accessing basic rights, and where migrants do not have the right to formally organize. So if I start unpacking all the ways the system makes things even worse for many people, I could be here all day. So even though we're facing huge challenges, us and other community organizations are doing everything we can to help out. We've poured all of our resources into handling the emergency, which means we've had to put other programs on hold for now. And it's tough. We also lost what we thought was secure funding because of the United States funding freeze. And that's made it even harder for us to manage everything. But still, our team has been really busy all over the country, working with community-run shelters, with safe spaces that are helping out migrants, and we've supported around 11,000 migrants and refugees who need it. We're also supporting migrant domestic worker community leaders. A lot of them have lost their homes, they've lost their jobs, but we're still putting our time and energy into helping others who are struggling, and to make sure that they have the support they need to do this important work. We've also made the conscious decision to work with migrants and refugees of all nationalities to make sure that nobody is left behind. We're really grateful to have each other in times like this, but it's also disappointing to see time and time again the lack of solidarity shown to our community and how little support there really is for those who still endure the effects of displacement. And it's also been tough to talk about migrants and what we're going through during the war, while also expressing our solidarity with the local Lebanese communities. In this political climate, some people are trying to twist our experiences to paint locals in a bad light. Although that's valid, it's not something we want to be part of. We refuse anything that tries to bend our narrative to fuel division and distract us from what we're really here to do. Our policy and advocacy work has been on the back burner during this crisis, and there's a lot of important issues that we wanted to tackle, and they're still lingering because we had to concentrate on the emergency instead. So in the end, actually, what I'm talking about here is not just a failure in emergency response. What's happening in Lebanon really shows us how ongoing labor exploitation can impact migrant workers and refugees during crises. Unfortunately, in Lebanon, we've been stuck in crisis mode for nearly 7 years now. And one of the biggest lessons we've learned is the power of community-based labor organizing. So when governments, international agencies, and employers turned their back on us, it was organized communities that stepped up to fill the void. So groups like ours, which started out fighting for labor rights, we quickly shifted into helping out during the humanitarian crisis because we realized that worker solidarity is a matter of life and death. The connections that we make through labor organizing have become really important when evacuating people from dangerous areas, for example, when we try to share important information, and when we try to get resources out to those in need. And this really shows why the right to organize is so important, especially in places with harsh labor practices in place, where us migrants are treated as disposable. So yeah, thank you for listening, and thank you for solidarity, for your solidarity. We will continue to do everything we can to support our community, and we hope you'll join us in these efforts.
For sure, Francisca. Thank you so much for sharing this harsh reality of migrant workers who are sustaining other people's lives, often at the peril of their own lives. In the excitement to hear from you, I didn't mention to introduce you properly. Francisca holds a graduate degree in public policy and administration, as well as international affairs and diplomacy. She's a human rights professional with expertise in migration, refugee, and fair trial rights. Thank you so much for bringing your work, your experience, and for all of the wonderful work Egna Legna does. Thank you so much. And I want to take us now to Eastern Africa with the International Community of Women Living with HIV in Eastern Africa with Peluth Bampa. They are a feminist advocate and head of programs at the International Community of Women Living with HIV in Eastern Africa, and brings over a decade of experience in those intersections of gender, health, and human rights. And Peluth, I wanted to ask you to speak a bit about how workers providing care to women living with HIV are being affected by the political and funding context of the US funding cuts. And if you see any parallels between this and the struggles that we have raised. We've talked a bit about the reality of the workers in Kerala, about the region in general by Public Services International, and migrant domestic workers. So please, Peluth, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Maggie, and greetings, everyone. It is an honor.
You're muted.
Hello, do you hear me well?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and greetings. It's an honor for me to be able to join you today in this feminist solidarity with care workers across the globe, especially women and gender diverse people whose labor remains invisible, remains undervalued and under attack. And I bring you warm greetings from the International Community of Women Living with HIV. It's a women-led, a membership-based regional network which is advancing the rights, the dignity, and leadership of women and girls living with HIV. We are an advocacy network. We started in 2005, and we exist to give visibility to women living with HIV. And our advocacy is based on evidence of our daily lived lives and experiences to influence policies, programs, and we use really different participatory processes. As you would know, there has really been a shift, a very kind of sharp shift with the funding freeze. As a community living with HIV, we need to be reminded that care is essential. It's not just for health, but it is for survival. And it's meant to build trust. It's to be just, but also for feminist societies. And yet, when you look around, those who provide care continue to be marginalized by the structural violence, from patriarchal systems that expect women to give endlessly, to lack of funding that we are facing right now, and the silence and shrinking efforts, and even including the criminalization laws that target our communities and which are erasing our contribution. The reality, and I hear, when you hear what is in Lebanon, when you hear what they're sharing from India, you can know realities around care work. But the reality for HIV-related care is that in our communities, care is not a buzzword, no. It is a way of life. It is expected, and it is survival. For women living with HIV, care work spans from physical, emotional, mental, political labor. It's beyond. It involves for us being able to support others through the treatment adherence, through peer counseling, provide those who are in need. It involves women living with HIV mobilizing for access to life-saving medication. It involves running drop-in centers, especially for the women and girls in their diversity, those who are stigmatized that they cannot go into the health facilities. It involves monitoring the health system as a community to ensure it is providing for the needs of women living with HIV, to ensure that we are receiving the right treatment. It involves holding the grief, the trauma and burden that the health systems and donors often ignore. So that care is something that we live on. It is survival, and yet it is undervalued. No one sees it. We do this work not only as caregivers, but as women living with HIV ourselves. We navigate stigma, we navigate gender-based violence, we navigate economic hardships, the health needs of our own, just for the community to survive. And often, this care is underpaid. It's unrecognized and it is unsustainable. But yet, we have to keep going. And many of us, this is about survival, because we are looking at survival of our own, we are looking at survival of our sisters, we are looking at survival of those around us. So reality in terms of the funding freeze is that, as you know, in January, the US the Trump administration freezed much of the funding to our major HIV care and treatment partners, to PEPFAR and other bilateral partners. It really brought a test to our resiliency. Over the past months, we have seen that devastating impact, and it has made most of our HIV care and treatment to be put on hold. Programs that once ensured access to ART, to mental health support and community drop-ins have been scaled back, or they are even shuttered completely. In some countries, our members are being forced to choose between buying food or transport to the nearest clinics, because the care that used to be close and community-led and near is no longer funded. It is back to community for itself, and we are on our own. The burden of filling these gaps where funding has freezed is falling back to women again, once again, on us, on women living with HIV. We are now providing more care with fewer resources. We are now doing more unpaid work with fewer protections. It is worse for women in diversity because it is integrating in stigma. It is integrating in the issues that they cannot face. Even the law is criminalizing them. And we are being asked to hold our communities together in systems that are collapsing around us. And still, we are not recognized as workers. Still, you will hear our labor is called volunteering, a word that erases our expertise, our exhaustion, and our contribution to public health. It is seen as volunteer work. And when I'm talking about this, I cannot forget the patriarchy, the punitive laws, and shrinking civic space, because they go hand in hand, and they are being worsened with a funding freeze. This crisis does not exist in isolation. It is rooted in patriarchy and systemic violence, really. The expectation that women's care is infinite. It is free. It is not accidental. It is political. It is how systems maintain inequality while we are extracting value from our labor. And the worst still is that in some areas, in some of our communities, criminalization of HIV is still there. They are looking at women as the people who are bringing HIV into the community, and they are facing those criminalizing laws. And some of them, just the community itself is becoming very violent against them. We are looking at reality where care workers, particularly women living with HIV, are doing essential work while also being criminalized, while they are being stigmatized, where they are being denied that leadership. And let us not forget the shrinking spaces of feminist organization, laws that silence civil society, cut off funding. Now we are looking at our advocacy efforts are also in a context like ours. It remains politically a sensitive issue. We cannot do much. We are trying, but then it is not that easy for you to stand. So in this moment of crisis, we must be clear that care for women living with HIV is labor. It's not volunteer work. And this labor deserves to be recognized. It deserves recognition, it deserves protection, and it also deserves investment. Our message today is simple, but it's also urgent, that without us, there is no care. And without care, there is no justice. We cannot build feminist economies by underpaying or ignoring the labor of the very women holding up our communities. We cannot talk about health equity while cutting the very resources that make this care possible. And we cannot claim solidarity unless we are willing to fund, unless we are willing to defend and fight alongside care workers everywhere. Obviously, to our sisters and comrades across the regions, whether you are organizing in Lebanon, if you are resisting in India, around the world, we know this, we see you, we honor your labor, and we stand with you because our care is not a gap filler. It is the foundation. Our work is not charity, it is labor, and our labor deserves really justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peluth, for that powerful message. Definitely, care work and health work is survival. Very powerful intervention. So kudos to everyone who has shared with us your very important experience and work, so brave with care workers on the ground in different parts of the world. Before we go to the Q&A, I just want to remind folks that I understand that everyone is wanting to connect in the chat about the emails and connecting with each other. Please join the AWID community because we want you to be able to connect in a safe space, and the exchange of open emails in a chat in a Zoom webinar is not necessarily the safest. So please, please, please join the AWID community. Our colleagues will post a message in the chat with the details that they have before. Coming back to our Q&A after this very, very powerful presentations from everyone in the advocacy and work of care labor, we have several questions for you. So there is a question for Anita around how many organizations and unions have given solidarity so far to the campaign, and if this has been shared with, those details have been shared with the government to insist on the importance to ASHA workers. Anita, could you share with us about that?
ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഗവൺമെന്റുമായിട്ട് സംസ്ഥാന ഗവൺമെന്റുമായിട്ടാണെങ്കിൽ ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഓണറേറിയം കൂട്ടുകയും കേന്ദ്ര സംസ്ഥാന സർക്കാരുമായിട്ടാണെങ്കിൽ ഇൻസെന്റീവ് കൂട്ടിത്തരികയാണ്.
If the details have been shared with the state government, then honorary funds needs to be increased, and if the same has to be connected with the central government, we need to increase the incentive funds. International unions are also supporting us. We are getting a very good support among the public. That is why we were able to continue with our strike for 87 days in a public place. The video is stuck. There is no audio from Anita's side.
Okay, what I am hearing is that yes, there have the details of support have been shared, and this is part of what is allowing you to continue. There are also a couple of questions, Francisca, around the kafala system. Folks asked if you could share a bit more about the kafala system, and if the migrant domestic workers in Lebanon, if their organizing efforts are connected with those of similar movements in neighboring countries, and what regional solidarity exists. If you could tell us a bit about that.
Yes, of course, I'd be happy to. So just a brief about the kafala system. It is a labor migration regime that exists in 9 countries in the Middle East, where basically all of the power is in the hands of the employer, and the employer is able to govern every aspect of the domestic worker's life, including where they sleep, where they stay, what they eat, how much they receive in terms of wage, and when they get to see and speak to their families at home. So it is really a modern form of slavery. And regarding the question about regional solidarity, we definitely in Lebanon connect with and support movements that are happening across the region. Since the kafala system exists in so many Middle Eastern countries, this shared fight naturally brings us together and to stand up against the exploitation that we all face. But still, building solidarity across borders is tough because of the restrictive nature of the kafala system. In many of these countries, and all of these countries actually, um, migrant labor unions are not formally recognized by the government. And so also because workers have their legal statuses tied to their employers, it's hard for them to move around and travel, communicate, and to organize collectively very effectively. So even with all these challenges, there are still ways we show solidarity in the region. A lot of organizations and grassroots groups share strategies. We boost each other's campaigns, and we call for like global attention on labor rights violations when they happen. And thanks to social media and digital platforms, we can stay connected even when we face these physical barriers. And we also gain a lot from working with international human rights and labor rights organizations that help link our movements across different countries. But to really strengthen this regional solidarity, what we need is support from allies outside the region, because there's only so much pressure that we can put internally. And I think we've seen the results of our work. We've been working really for decades, not just as a movement, but with allies locally who have been working to abolish the kafala system. And we've only been able to accomplish so much. So we need outside support from, the global movements to help create some pressure and push for change, to amplify our demands, to help us organize legal advocacy. And this could really help boost our collective efforts.
Thank you so much, Francisca. There's also another question that I think is within your realm is, what are some effective processes you could recommend for others in conflict situations? If you could go back in time, could you have planned in any way?
We tried our best to plan. So I don't know, this is some bittersweet experience for us that we had to, over the past 7 years, carry the weight of the effects of crisis on our community. But what we've learned really is the importance of just community organizing, no matter how small it looks like. So whenever you're not in crisis situations, try as much as you can to build community. Be in touch with the people who are normally forgotten by society, who existing systems already exclude. Whether this is your neighbor, somebody at work, somebody you come across every day on your way to work. Try to build connections as much as you can. Try to find out how people are already excluded, and in crisis situations, how these could, how their current situation can be exacerbated. This is really how we built our strategy of crisis response, is really listening to people who are systematically excluded. That includes single mothers, children, people with disabilities, people with long-term health conditions. So really listening to those who are ignored and going to them in times of crisis and making sure that they are looked after and that they are taken care of. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much. We have also a general question for any of you that might want to answer. Says, how do you see the implementation of a more radical approach to care work in global governance organizations such as the UN, etc., helping the cause on the ground? Would you say this more radical approach should look like in terms of demands, structures, power critique? So a question on how do either of you see a more radical care approach, and what would that look like? I don't know if Kate, Anita, or Peluth want to take this, since Francisca has already been answering quite a lot.
Sure, Maggie, I can jump in.
Go ahead.
It's a good question around how do we completely shift the approach to care. There were a couple of things I mentioned. One is around care as a human right and public good. And there are some governments actually, or there's having that discussion around even including care as a human right in constitutions. I mean, this is mainly in Latin America, where there's a discussion around really with progressive governments recognizing care as a potential constitutional right. Within the UN system, we're also trying to have a discussion around recognizing care as a human right within the UN Human Rights Council. But I think part of what I mentioned earlier around a radical approach is really around trying to challenge the prevailing narrative that is increasingly evident in the UN system, including in UN Women, which is around the commercialization of care. And UN Women has held care forums, and there's a group of global unions and others that are trying to challenge the idea that the answer to the care needs is to encourage the private sector to provide that care. Because, of course, we know when anything is privatized, first of all, it really has gendered impacts. The labor rights of care workers are undermined. And, of course, the people that really need it don't receive any services that are commercialized. So I think one of the key approaches has to be to have care recognized as a public good that governments are responsible for, and really de-link that. And I think part of climate movements and other movements are joining that demand, because care is also, of course, much less of a fossil fuel dependent service in our societies, and it's a shift away from consumption can be one where care is at the center of any new economic models.
Thank you so much for that, Kate. Peluth, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just to add on, I think when you look at when you're looking at it in terms of the radical approach to care that needs to happen, for example, in the UN system, we need to move from lip service to lived practice, really. Right now, care is often acknowledged in reports and resolutions, but the systems remain extractive. They remain driven by economic logic that undervalues that care, especially underpaid care by women in the global south. So we need to look at how then can it be really recognized. I think one, recognizing care work as a political and economic labor is very important. There is need to have that essential infrastructure, not as charity, but also not as social welfare. This means there is that need to integrate care work into the global economic planning, development financing, but also in terms of the sustainable development goals implementation, with really money, with really policies, but also with really direction and really protection. So that radical care says caring for people is not a cost to be managed. It has to be the foundation of the economies and societies. That is number one. But also, two, as the UN system, even others, I think there is need really to ensure that there is shifting of power to care workers themselves. A radical care approach needs to center on those doing the care work in all decision making. That means care workers, whether they are peer educators, where they are these who are providing of advocacy to migrant workers, whether they are domestic workers, whether home-based workers, they must be at the table in these global spaces, including those UN panels in consultations and in negotiations. We don't need to have more conversations about us when we are not part of the space that they are discussing. And lastly, I think we need to hold the UN accountable for harm. It means that we need to confront the UN's own complexities. For example, if you look at you undermine the care systems overnight. If you are cutting off the money that we need, then it means we are not going to have that care. It means that we need to discuss the funding directly. We need the funds. And in terms of this funding care directly at the community, not just through government, not just through these large NGOs, it must be through the care organization that are down on the ground at the community, the informal care workers doing the frontline work. They often go without salary and they go without. So we need that and a restricted core funding to sustain this work, but we also need a radical system where funding is based on the care themselves. So it's not just something that may happen overnight, but ultimately the radical care work approach needs that kind of systematic transformation. We need to hold those in power. We need money to flow. We need lives and labor to be valued. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peluth. We have also another question for all the three speakers. What strategies do caregivers, in your experience, use in order to make sure they are not repeating patriarchal models of care? And here the person's thinking, they say they're thinking of things like when families may want a different care practice than the women receiving care. Are there any reflections? And there's also a connected question to that, which is folks asking about the criminalization for supporting communities, and they'd love to hear about how you're all organizing with other care movements.
Okay, maybe I can
Please,
start
go ahead.
On the strategies. So, and it's really a reflective question. One of the most important lessons we've learned as women living with HIV who provide care to our peers, to communities, is that care must be centered on autonomy, on consent and dignity, not on what families, the health system or society thinks is best for us. That is one of the lessons. So to avoid replicating those patriarchal models of care, the caregivers in our communities, they ensure that one, they are centering the voices of women receiving care. We prioritize peer-led care. That is where women living with HIV, they are caring for other women living with HIV. This naturally shifts power dynamics because we are not outsiders or authorities, and we are equals, and we understand the lived realities. We ask, what do you need? What feels safe for you? We reject kind of the models that families or system get to make decisions on the behalf of women, especially when those decisions erase agency and ensure and put pressure on those kind of unwanted care or unwanted treatment. Then number two, we've also been challenging harmful norms through dialogue and education. Many of our care workers engage in community sensitization, not just with women, but with their partners, with their families and health providers to unpack the power dynamics and shift harmful beliefs. For example, we discuss why a woman has a right to confidentiality and how they need to be supported, even in that care kind of providence to the family, how the husbands can come in, how the extended family needs to come in. We also ensure that we build those safe spaces, the drop-in centers and support groups where women can share the experience without that judgment, and we can be able to find that validation outside the patriarchal structures. So And lastly, using the feminist principles really to train the care workers. While we do this care as kind of voluntary work, we are increasingly investing in training and mentorship that is rooted mainly in the feminist values that care must be consent-based and survivor-led. And we ensure that really we are affirming the diverse identities that we have. And this has also helped us to ensure that the care we do is not being forced, but we are seeing that kind of shift from the patriarchal system. We are building models that are liberating us and are not controlling us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peluth. I have another question. There's a question on how can we effectively integrate the gender equality, disability, and social inclusion approach into community care strategies, and also wondering how we can promote greater inclusivity and support for female care workers. I don't know if Kate or Anita or Francisca want to take this question.
Sorry, have a mute. Well, I think as I was mentioning earlier with the demands that the care workers and their unions have put together, one of them is about their right to care, their right to receive care, that who cares for them as care workers. And Anita mentioned that a lot of the community health workers are actually from marginalized backgrounds, and that varies per country on what that exactly means. Where these are often countries where there's caste systems, but there may also be Indigenous women working as community health workers. And so part of their demand is that they should be able to receive care as well as give care, and also have their, as Anita mentioned, their other care work recognised, that they also often carry the burden of various forms of care for their families, which could be extended and community. So there are a number of demands that they are making for their own care, and of course that to also reflect the social environments they're living in. I can see we've got a number of people joining from Pakistan and also from Afghanistan. I mean, some of the areas that women are working in, they may be the only woman that actually some other women get to meet in their lives that are outside of the family. They're going door to door and they're talking about often quite personal, a lot of issues that aren't only about health. They're about sexual and reproductive health, but it could be about other intersecting issues, about violence in the home and so forth. So there's also the need for counselling and support. I mean, they're dealing with very traumatic situations, and some of those women have to go with bodyguards. We've had women murdered who are doing this work. It's very traumatic sometimes, and you've got the pandemic and other situations where there's a lot of conflict around the work they're doing. So there is a need for all forms of care, for psychosocial support, as well as for the basic health supports that they need.
Thank you so much, Kate. We are getting close to the end. There are a lot of questions. I know not all of them have been answered. I would like to invite everybody to join the AWID community. Please join us so that we can continue this conversation on care work that's so important in a safe space such as the AWID community. I would like to give each of the speakers a minute to give us a closing message and any call to action and solidarity that you might have. So let me start by going back to you, Anita. What is your closing message and your call to action for everyone who is listening to us right now?
Ma'am, so according to the government, have called us for a discussion. We only requested for honorarium increment, but the government were not ready to provide us the honorarium. So by internationally and at the public places, we have got enough of support um, to handle all the situation and help us economically. That's what we are looking for. We are looking for our economical increment from you all.
Thank you so much, Anita. Kate, closing message and call to action.
Well, first of all, the call to action is to sign this petition that is for Anita's union, so for the ASHA workers in Kerala. It does go to the government, and the government has, acknowledged our letter when we sent it to them. And we know that the government of Kerala is it's a progressive government. It's the state in India that should lead in this. And if they do it, perhaps we'll get other states in India. So we really want to acknowledge that they have capacity to change the lives of all these women. So really encourage people to sign on to that petition. I just really also want to leave the last message, which is I really do believe that the feminist movement perhaps it can have a lot of impact by supporting unionism, because, as you know, I think we can see from the community health workers, historically, perhaps their unions weren't recognised, and that's also a fault of the union movement. But that is the way to bring about change, is for women to have power collectively. So that's my other message: is let's, as a feminist movement, really get behind unionism for community health workers. Thanks again for inviting us.
Thank you so much, Kate. Francisca, closing message and call to action, please.
Yes, of course. So I'm sorry, I can't resist, but also maybe integrate some answers to the questions in the Q&A in my closing message. So look, the kafala system isn't just a standalone issue. It's tied to global care chains and economic policies that push people to migrate. It's all part of a bigger picture of racial capitalism that takes advantage of labor from the global south to benefit those in the global north and also the elites back home. So when we talk about migrant domestic workers or care workers in the Middle East, it's important to highlight these connections. Our exploitation isn't just some random occurrence, it's a built-in part of global economic systems that undervalue certain types of work and specific groups of people. I saw a question about accountability. How can we hold governments accountable? And this is a question we've been trying to find an answer to in the Middle East, and at least in Ethiopia. Nobody has ever been held accountable to crimes committed against migrant workers. Not governments, not employers, not traffickers, no matter how much evidence there is. So with the power we currently have, what we can do is to push back against the idea that migrant workers are any less important to the communities we're part of. Our struggles deserve just as much attention. Our deaths matter just as much. Our need for safety and stability is just as urgent. And crisis for us is a regular part of life. We deal with the daily struggles of the kafala system, plus the added stress of war, economic downturns, like pandemics. It's like we're always in a state of emergency. And a lot of that is kept out of sight most of the time. Unless, the war in Lebanon happened, I don't think people would have heard of some of our stories. But to fight for our dignity and rights, we have to keep going. We have to keep pushing back through community organizing, through mutual aid, direct action, and other creative ways that we can resist. I also saw a question about whether there's a campaign to abolish the kafala system. Of course there is, and it's not just a campaign, it's a whole movement. So please follow our socials. We're pretty easy to find. And we want you to amplify our stories, because when you do that, you're not just passing on information, you're standing with us in this fight. You're making sure that whenever the next crisis hits, we won't be overlooked or left behind. And that is the kind of solidarity we really need. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisca, for bringing in the issue of intersectionality and how the oppressions build together. Peluth, closing message and call to action, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you, AWID, for and all the panelists and all the participants for creating this powerful space for solidarity. And as I close this, I say care work is not just about compassion. It is political, it is labor, it is resistant. And for women living with HIV across Eastern Africa and beyond, care is not optional. It is what keeps our communities alive when our systems really fail us. Yet we continue to do this work. So today, our call for action is 1, recognizing HIV-related care work as essential feminist labor, not charity, not volunteering, but work that sustains health systems. 2 is to have flexible and funding funds. And we also call upon care, particularly women living with HIV, in decision-making spaces, not just as beneficiaries, but as experts and as leaders. And we need to support the mental health, economic dignity of frontline care workers, many of whom are coping with grief, they are coping with burnout, they are coping with the systematic neglect. And lastly, as feminist solid group, we need to reclaim care as a collective political act. So there is dignity, there is justice, there is equity across all borders. Because as a feminist future, it is only possible when care is at the center of our policies, of our movements. Let's not just recognize care, let's radically transform how it is valued, funded, and protected. Thank you, and in solidarity, let's keep building and unmasking the violence that is invisible in this care work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peluth. Care work is work. To take us away, I want to bring in BFE Building Feminist Economies Manager, Sanyu Awori. And just a reminder for everyone asking this question in the chat. Yes, we will share this recording. We will share it in YouTube. So be on the lookout for it and join the AWID community. Sanyu, take us away.
I mean, Peluth is a tough act to follow, but I just wanted to say to thank everyone for making time to be here, because our gathering is about affirming that workers who are providing care deserve their dignity, protection, and rights. The systems of power know that care work is vital. And as Professor Lynn Osoma, an African feminist, says, the issue is the functioning of capitalism depends on a deliberate denial and disavowal of the work that women does. And so we're standing here today in our collective refusal of how the patriarchy and economic and political systems continue to profit and benefit from this labor. And we say enough is enough. It cannot be that we have our economies cater to big business, to the wealthy, to the 1%, to the economic elite, and yet we ignore communities providing care, doing life-sustaining work. So these moments of crisis call for collective action. This is where the systems will tremble. Let's make them tremble. And so please sign. We stand up, we lean into the power we have. And so please sign and share with your movement and show up for the solidarity actions to support our comrades in Kerala, in Lebanon, in Uganda, and more. Let's very loudly say that care work is work and labor justice is gender justice, is racial justice. There's a Menti link I'm going to drop in the chat. And it would be great to get your thoughts on this convening and your feedback, and continue to engage with us on the AWID community. And a big thank you to our speakers who are here just taking time as they're busy organizing to share their experiences. Over to you, Maggie. Maggie, you are on mute.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Your participation, your presence from all over the world made this the powerful space that it was. Thank you, the speakers, for all of your inspirational and powerful work on the ground. Care work is where work, and it is a revolution that will bring down the patriarchy, bring down the capitalist system, because we are holding the world, and our lives matter, and the well-being of care workers matter. Thank you for being here. Please join the AWID community, and also let us know through this link in Menti what you thought about this, and let's keep the conversation going. We are definitely going to share this through our YouTube channels, and as you asked, we will also create a summary to share with you. So thank you so much for your questions, your comments, your suggestions. Let's keep this conversation coming and the fight going. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.